Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it's my good friend Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very, very well. We are 4 hours, about three hours to change.
4 hours, yeah.
Game one of the NFL season. My wife went, so this is like real, right? That's how she said it to me this morning. This one, like,
because
college football
preseason with the same fervor as one might approach the start of the regular season. I assume that she was a little bit confused.
Week 0 of college football, week 1 of college football. That was very hard to explain to my wife that there's 2 week 1s essentially in college football. But I was like, no, this is for real. It's like Chiefs, Lions. And she's like, starters? Like, starters. Because she understood, like, she would watch me in preseason, kind of like check, like, wait, like, why are you watching this? I'm like, well, they have like some rookie I'm trying to watch right here. But she's like, oh, didn't you say they don't play the starters in the preseason? I'm like, yeah, well, sometimes they do. Okay, no, it's fine. It's fine. Just let me watch this.
You're a better man than me with all that preseason football that you're digging into. My wife today asked me, "Do you want to go look at a couch tonight?" And I was like, "I don't think so." Thursday nights are now off limits, baby. Unfortunately, because we are back. Yes. This is our week 1 grab bag, is what we are calling the Thursday into Friday podcast this year, because we don't want it to just be a straight preview. We're going to talk about some bigger picture trends in the NFL, some offenses and defenses that we like, obviously, as we get into the season. That hasn't happened yet, so we're not going to do that today, but it's going to be kind of a smattering of different topics that we're going to dig into every single week. Some looking forward, some looking back. So that's what we're calling this year. This is the Thursday grab bag on the Athletic Football Show. This is edition 1, slightly different for a couple different reasons. One, we're going to do a little bit more previewing today because it's week 1, and we're going to look forward to a lot of these games, a lot of curiosities. We'll dig into about 5 or so games here in a couple different ways. Also a difference, Diana Rossini is going to be joining us a little bit later in the show to chat through some of the big news throughout the NFL this week. Part of the reason Diana's on today is because next week, me and Diana are starting a YouTube show that will run on Tuesdays. So because we didn't have that before week 1, we decided to have Diana on, have a little newsworthy conversation. But starting next week, me and Diana will be coming your guys' way every Tuesday afternoon on the Athletic Football Show YouTube channel. But now it's time to get into this. We are here. It is week 1. There is so much to chew on, so many good games already that we're going to dig into today. But just from a big picture perspective, this year is just filled with so many elite teams, especially concentrated in the AFC. And that's reflected in the week 1 schedule that we're looking at and some of the matchups that we're looking at. The number of young players, young quarterbacks that can kind of define this season. All these guys who are 27, 28 years old, with Brady now gone, Rodgers getting closer to 40. This group feels like they've taken control of the NFL. And I think that the week 1 slate and the 2023 season in general, to me, is sort of an expression of that.
Yeah, it's, well, not only just concentrated in one conference, it seems to be concentrated into one time zone, the Eastern time zone, especially. No offense to the defending Super Bowl champions, but no, seriously, not just quarterbacks and the young talents. It feels like there's just stars popping at every position now. Of course, the receiver kind of revolution going on, or continued evolution going on, but just offensive line talent. How many guys did we say last year? It's like, wow, this guy broke out. This guy broke out. Defensive tackle, offensive tackle, even safety spots. It's just, we're kind of like, it just feels like just, okay, this is a new chapter of the NFL. And of course, the quarterbacks are the ones going to lead the way, but I feel like their characterization, more athletic, more speed than we've ever seen before at the position. They kind of are a distilled version of kind of the evolution going on at every position, it feels like. So I think all of them are great torchbearers for the NFL and for football, which I think is so awesome. So many guys that are easy to cheer for. It's awesome. We were doing our awards prediction show, and that's just how I ended the pod. It was like, guys, this is going to be a sweet season. Yeah. This is going to be really cool. There's a lot of fun teams, a lot of good units, and a lot of good players. So you can't ask for more than that.
I don't know if we're going to get through a week on the schedule without 2 marquee type games. I'd have to actually look at it, but just by the math alone and the odds, it feels like we're going to get at least 1 or 2 of these every single week. And we have our share heading into week 1. So let's do this. Our 3 games of the week that we wanted to dig into. Let's start with the team I picked to win the Super Bowl and the guy I picked to win the MVP this year. Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals going up against a Cleveland Browns team that
You're also high on.
Well, I am also high on. So
yes.
This is a fantastic matchup, in my opinion, on both sides of the ball, and potentially a telling matchup on both sides of the ball. So let's start with when the Bengals have the ball. When the Bengals are on offense playing against the Browns defense, what's the number one thing that you're going to be zeroing in on this week?
How does Jim Schwartz, every defense coordinator has to answer this question when they play the Bengals. How do you contain their weapons? How do you contain the best receiver room in the country, in the league, with one of the best quarterbacks in the league, who can just put it on, what has great chemistry with these guys, put it on the money over and over and over? Everyone has to figure out what their formula is against this Bengals team, because especially what they did last year. So really, how much does Jim Schwartz lean into what he has done before? He is a single high coverage like aficionado. Even in the preseason, he showed that 80% of the snaps that the Browns played this preseason was single high. And why that is important is that means isolated coverage on the outside over and over and over again. And that's where the Bengals playmakers are, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So how they answer that, does he tweak his formula, or does he just stick to what his DNA is? That is what I'm going to be focusing on. And I think it's going to be an interesting answer that we'll find out, or at least an indication of an answer that we'll find out in this game.
Week one always provides such a fascinating mirror, like potentially a funhouse mirror, but always a mirror for every single one of these teams. The Browns under Joe Woods were a quarters-based defense who were not afraid to live in light boxes and kind of follow that defensive trend that we've seen around the league. Their version is the Niners-Jets version, but they're not playing with a lot of single high looks and crowding the box. It burned them. I mean, that's why they made the change partially. But under Jim Schwartz, they're not going to live like that. It's going to be more man. It's going to be more single high. But teams didn't do that against the Bengals last year.
No.
So that mirror that we're holding up to the Browns defense is, if you're going to play with a lot of single high coverages and a lot of man coverage against the Bengals, then you're going to do it against everybody. So we have an answer about what they want to be. If you're not going to do that, and you're going to drift away from what Jim Schwartz's identity has been, that is an indication potentially moving forward that this Browns defense is going to be more flexible than we might anticipate. And that's why week one is awesome, because we're going to get an answer on that. And I think the Bengals are such an interesting way to kind of pull that answer out and get some information about what this Jim Schwartz-led defense is going to look like.
And we're excited about the additions they made, like up front, and they actually have better answers for what the Bengals adjusted to with their more efficient run game. They added some more beef on the interior in free agency, and actually even a little bit in the draft, but they also had juice to help out Myles Garrett. So that's interesting to me too, is Jim Schwartz has a little bit of blitzing in his DNA as well. Does he tweak that dial a little bit? Does he lean into blitzing a little bit to heat up? The Bengals have new running backs and pass protection. That's where Samaje Perine, your favorite player in the league, but he was very, very valuable. Whatever he is as a running back, as a pass protector on passing down, and as a pass catcher, he is a very useful running back. But that was his strength, and that was a weapon for this Bengals team, just how they played. So what he leans into, what he wants to dial into, what he wants to attack. Does he just lean into what he's done before? It's going to be very, very interesting. It's one of the matchups I can't wait to see. And the other little tweak I want to see with Jim Schwartz, or not even a tweak, he will spot drop his zone coverages. And that's old school, meaning guys truly go to a zone. There's not a lot of match rules. He does a little bit of everything, but he is an old school coach in that way, that he will sprinkle that in. The Bengals love these back shoulder throws when they get single high with their big, strong receivers. So spot drop, you can maybe get a guy underneath that if they're fast enough. So I'm just curious. That's just something I'm going to be looking forward to, if that little change up kind of comes into play during this game.
And with match zone, it can turn into man in a way that those back shoulder throws are a little bit more effective than they might be against a traditional spot drop zone.
Man coverages, I have number 11. If that's a receiver is number 11, I have number 11. Zone is I'm dropping to this area of the field and I am guarding this area of the field with my eyes on the quarterback. Match is I have number 1 of 1, 2, and 3 receivers.
And that's how they're aligned. One from the outside, counting outside to in.
And so that's the difference between match zone and man coverage when we talk about that stuff. But this is a great example of someone that uses more zone, traditional zone, than more match, which was what we see in the NFL today.
Chris Evans is going to be that third down back, presumably, for the Bengals. That's almost out of default. They just don't trust Joe Mixon in that role. And where that was a real strength for Samaje Perine, I think it might be a little bit more of an adventure for whoever they drop into those drop back passing situations for Cleveland. And then one more thing in the pass protection, you alluded to it a little bit. Myles Garrett has some help now, and this is a retooled Bengals offensive line. They feel better about this group than they've ever felt about front five starting offensive line for the Bengals. How do they hold up against this very new, very improved Browns front? I think is a good test on both sides for both of these teams.
Right. Yeah. It's trial by fire for both sides. It's pretty cool. It could be two really good units, but they're getting tested right off the bat in the division too.
Let's get to the other side of the ball. Number one thing you are watching when the Browns have the ball against the Bengals defense this weekend.
This is what we talked about in our preview for the Browns offense, especially was how does this mixing of what Deshaun Watson is good at, which is more of a shotgun heavy approach with RPOs, maybe more sprinkled in, to what the Browns have leaned into, especially as Stefanski, Nick Chubb, and Bill Callahan, their offensive line coach, is they like kind of a little bit more traditional runs. So, and traditional under center looks. So what is the formula that they get to? And whether that kind of leads to, hey, they only do this things out of this formation. They only do this thing out of this formations, which ironically is what the old Bengals offense had to get through about having indicators. So kind of funny on that, kind of just for this game, but just this Browns team, what is this formula of trying to kind of merge two worlds with their $250 million quarterback with what has worked for them in the past?
I went back and I watched the late season game these two teams played against each other. I think it was week 14 last year. So Deshaun Watson was starting, and they were starting to incorporate some of these ideas, but you can tell it's like 62% of the way there. So a lot of the motion and a lot of the eye candy and splashing the water that we talk about that I think will be done by Elijah Moore within this offense this year. It was Demetric Felton last year, who's not even on the roster anymore.
Right.
So it felt like they were trying to get to the place that they're in now with this shotgun-based RPO world that they could live in with Deshaun Watson, but they just couldn't do it all the way last year. And some of the numbers that the Browns offense played in during that game last season, they were in 11 personnel on 83% of their snaps, which is a huge departure from what we typically associate with the Browns. And the Bengals countered with a lot of light boxes, which I think is what the Browns want. If they're going to spread things out this year, they still want to run it, but they want to run it into more favorable looks. The Bengals were fantastic stopping the run out of those light boxes when these two teams played each other last year late in the season. I think it was 2.7 yards a carry, and the Bengals are playing with 6 or fewer guys in the box on like 68% of their snaps. So that's a challenge. If you're going to line up that way in 11 and spread things out and you still can't run it, it doesn't really matter what we're going to get out of Deshaun Watson. So if the Bengals can defend the run like they did the last time these two teams played, even in that revamped model of the Browns offense, that's going to be a problem for Cleveland.
Yeah, even with Deshaun Watson, and of course they want to get him going. That is going to make or break this Browns team this whole year. That's the true strength of this team. They're trying to get that passing game up to that level of what their run game has been the last few years. And they're going against one of the best defensive coordinators who makes great game plan adjustments, who is great with time on his hands, and Lou Anarumo with the Bengals. They're going to make it tough. And so do any of those indicators that the Browns give, hey, they're in shotgun, that means they're doing this. Hey, they're under center in this formation, that means they're going to do this run play. The Bengals team has a lot of good players, a lot of smart players. Yes, they're working in 2 new safeties, but we kind of like those 2 new safeties. So yeah, it's a smart veteran
I trust
team.
the rest of the infrastructure to lift those guys, I guess is how I would describe
9 other starters essentially. And
tons
really only
of continuity.
one new guy, quote unquote, because the other guy is a first round pick that's been in the system. So yeah, it's one of the defenses you trust the most to find an answer. So the Browns have to find their answers.
The tells thing is a really good one. What kind of tells do they give when they're under center, when they're in shotgun? Are there tendencies that they start to develop because those worlds can feel so isolated? I think that's really important. There was one stretch I wanted to talk about very quickly before we moved on from the week 14 game last year. It was a play action pass on first down, and the route combination left a guy on an in-breaker wide open over the middle, and Watson just doesn't throw it. He just doesn't throw it. Instead, he throws the ball at David Njoku in the backfield for a 4-yard loss. So now it's 2nd and 14. Okay. They run the ball on 2nd and 14 because they've done that a lot in Cleveland, where Stefanski's an analytically minded guy, but they didn't feel comfortable enough with the offense and the quarterbacks that they ran on 2nd and long a lot. It was like a 2-yard gain. So now you're in 3rd and 12, another sack, punt. That type of sequence is what the Browns are hoping to avoid this year on multiple different levels. Watson's pocket presence was a nightmare the last time these two teams played. If that's not better, it's over. None of the rest of this matters. We can talk about formations and melding styles, whatever. None of the rest of this matters. And it was awful last time these two teams played. I do not think the Browns will run the football anymore on 2nd and 13. I think that style of who they were is out the window. So those little pockets of who that team was at stretches last year, that's what they're trying to avoid. And this is going to be a very good test early on for whether or not they can avoid those sorts of runs.
And just to tie in one last thing is that you said the 11 personnel, they wanted to get into that. And you already mentioned Elijah Moore. They drafted Cedric Tillman. They have more firepower at those spots with Amari Cooper. So it's like, it's not an idea anymore. They actually have some resources at those spots that they're trying to improve.
I also, one thing about the safeties on the Bengals, I think we're going to see the Browns try to get them a couple times. I think they're going to try to hit some explosives here, and they're going to test those guys early on and the discipline early on.
It's going to be a good game.
Next one here, Chargers and the Dolphins, a rematch of another late season matchup that we saw last year that was, I think, really telling about who the Dolphins were during that stretch. It's a crossroads game. That's exactly what it felt like for the Chargers defense and for the Dolphins offense. So let's start on that side of the ball. Number one thing you are looking for when the Dolphins have the ball on Sunday in this game.
It's who wins first and second down in this game. This Dolphins team is built through explosives. Yeah, I would be too if I had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as my two top options that I'm going to feed over and over. Kind of going back to that game, and I wrote about it afterwards, was I forgot how many, I knew third downs were huge in that game and what the Chargers did on third down and fourth down, but it was how they got there. They played the RPO world that the Dolphins want to be in really well, and they made it tough. And so they created a lot of third and longs. The Dolphins had 9 third downs of 7 yards or more. So that's third and long or third and extra long. They averaged 5 of those per game last year. So that is almost double their league or their average over the year. That's really, really hard. It was 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14. And then on 3rd and 4th down, it's how they changed the picture afterwards. That, of course, they got physical with the receivers. They try to slow them down. But when you're in 3rd and 12, it's way easier to play cover 2 in this soft coverage and have my intermediate linebackers get way deep. They weren't worried about any checkdowns. So I want to see if it's like a question, kind of quasi question, is like, do the Chargers just do that again? Mike, but it's the Dolphins have smart coaches.
And what is the Dolphins' response?
Correct. And what they did the last year was they stopped RPOing. Is they went straight run game, under center run game, and they did that game in the Bills game. We talked about this a bunch, but how much they lean into that? I just said that Hill and Waddle are their weapons, but do they lean into the run game, which has been more of a complementary piece than more something that they leaned into before?
Our biggest question about the Dolphins on offense this year, outside of health, was what is the evolution going to look like? After teams started throwing the curveball in the back half of the season, how do the Dolphins try to hit it? We get the answer immediately. Awesome. This is the best possible week 1 matchup because we get that test. We get the defense that gave them such a hard time. And I think I brought this up on the Dolphins preview, but I was talking to a coach on that Chargers staff this summer about the plan they had for that Dolphins team and these combo coverages with man on one side and zone on the other and just disrupting timing and being really physical. And he said, this is something we devised specifically for them. This was a Dolphins specific plan because of the way they like to play. And so you combine that timing disruption with the physicality of their defensive backs with this kind of pack the paint mentality of we're going to have all these guys in the middle of the field. We're going to force you to throw the ball outside. So if you can't throw the ball,
it's the Jordan rules. Pack the paint and beat the shit out of them. That's what it is. It's the Detroit Pistons Jordan rules. Now, I would not compare the Chargers to the late 80s Pistons, early 90s Pistons, but
it's the opposite in terms of feel.
It could be more opposite, but it's the Jordan rules. Sorry to interrupt, but it just hit me like a lightning bolt.
And so that we're going to find out. Can the Dolphins run the ball consistently into those looks where you should be able to, and can they throw the ball outside the numbers if teams consistently try to make them do that? And again, this is just such a perfect test for those questions that we have about Miami. One thing to mention, JC Jackson has been banged up a little bit in practice. It sounds like he is going to play. So we're going to see what a nominally healthy Chargers secondary looks like heading into the season, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Teron Armstead has not been practicing. And that is a concern because when you go back and you watch this game from last year, the protection issues for the Dolphins consistently creep up. Teron Armstead was banged up in that game, and Kyle Van Noy was getting the better of him often. And Morgan Fox had one hell of a game against the interior of this Dolphins offensive line. So again, we're going to find out really damn quick where this Dolphins line is at in pass protection against Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and a group that is going to try to get after them in this game.
A healthy Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, that is, when they're on the field together, it's amazing, but they just have to be on the field together. But that's where those third and longs and those passing downs, the soft coverage, And the changing of the picture too is very good. Pre-snap guy, but maybe post-snap, he kind of gets a little foggy, but he also hold on to the ball that extra half second. I would like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa to have an extra half second to work against the Dolphins offensive line. So it all ties in together. I'm curious too if the Chargers, if they bring any funky blitzes, because Staley got deep in that bag last year, bringing some funky looks on 3rd and 4th down. So that's something I'm curious that he might throw in as a changeup as well.
A great barometer for both teams. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. Number one thing that you're looking for when the Chargers have the ball on Sunday against the Dolphins defense.
First off, I'm really excited to watch this coordinator battle. Just two guys that's kind of been in our lives.
I mean, the highest profile hires, I think, at each one of these positions in the NFL this offseason. Kellen Moore was out of a job for like 6 hours, and Vic Fangio is being paid a healthy amount of money to be the defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, these two guys had some name recognition when they hit the market. But honestly, I just want to see what their identities. Oh, well, we know what their identities are, but the identities with these pieces. And I want to see if this Chargers team that has talked about, we're going to let Justin Herbert rip it. We're going to let him bomb it down the field, push the ball, going against a defense that is literally built to not let you do that. So it is we're trying to prove something against a defense that wants you to try to prove that. And I'm curious if that's who's gonna pop first. Do they try to attack them over the top? Do they lean into stuff underneath, whether it's a run game or short passes? I just want to see. I just want to see who kind of blinks or who pops first in this game, because I think both sides are talented and both sides have really good play callers or good play callers. How does it all unfold and who kind of just blinks in the end first?
It's another great way to get information about the Chargers offense, because that's how defenses played them last year. They essentially said, we're not going to let you take these shots over the top with your cannon-armed quarterback. It's not going to happen. And then when they had to find a changeup, they struggled to do so. They could not run the ball against those looks. The Chargers last season finished 29th in the NFL in EPA per rush against 6-man boxes. 29th. You can't live that way.
No.
Eventually, you're going to short circuit everything else you want to do offensively. So if the Dolphins are going to sit there in those sorts of boxes in a Fangio-esque way, the Chargers need to be able to run the ball. And if they can't, this building optimism that we've had about the Kellen Moore-led version of this team gets sapped away very quickly. And I get very sad, as they are one of my teams in the 10-team draft that we did.
Oh man, just get sad because there's that I think the wide range of outcomes with this Chargers offense, always with the Chargers, is just that's what kind of makes them just so interesting. It's like sometimes you're just anticipating a car wreck, but sometimes they go 120 and it looks beautiful, and you're just like, oh, look at that Ferrari go. And then sometimes it just swerves and it's terrible, but it's a test of discipline as well. I think one of my critiques of Kellen Fangio is as disciplined as it gets as a play caller. He's going to run what he runs, but Kellen Moore, on the other hand, that's one of my criticisms has been he feels like he has 50 great plays that he wants to call all 50, as opposed to maybe leaning into what is working. So does he stay patient, or does he get impatient because he has a big bazooka arm quarterback and he's like, hell yeah, let's go. Let's let it rip.
Quietly great set of matchups on that side of the ball is the Dolphins front against the Chargers offensive line. The Dolphins front, I think we've spent so much time talking about Fangio and about the offensive pieces. Zach Sealer got paid like $12 million a year this offseason. I think a lot of people looked at that and said, who? He is an awesome interior defensive lineman. You combine that with Christian Wilkins, Jalen Phillips, who both of us said would be a breakout player this year, Bradley Chubb, who they paid an insane amount of money and traded a first-round pick for. That group going against what I am comfortable saying is the best Chargers offensive line in 5 years, 7 years. It's been a long time since the Chargers have had an offensive line this good. And that's saying something. Because it's not like it's full of like all pro players.
It's like a no-hitter. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to like ruin it as it's going. They're healthy right now. So that's why I was like, Khalil Mack and Bosa are healthy.
And the offensive line, we can stop talking about this. There's no reason to spoil it before we get into it.
No, but also too is Austin Eckler is a great running back. How does he hold up in this game if they're just going to go, hey, we're feeding you down in between the tackles? Other backups, other running backs have to step up as well. So that's always been a complaint for my Chargers roster critiques. But this might be a game where they could really use a hammerhead because they might need it.
Third matchup, third game of the week for us here, the Bills and the Jets. This is the type of game I was imagining in the open when we were talking about just the amount of awesome games that are just going to be lining the schedule this year. The fact that this is week 1 Monday night is we get this Bills team who you picked to win the Super Bowl going up against an Aaron Rodgers-led Jets team. You can't ask for anything more than this. So let's start with the Bills offense against the Jets defense. Number one thing you were looking for when those two units are on the field together.
Everything kind of every time we've talked about this Bills team, I think anytime we've mentioned them is how this kind of identity shift or ways to change their identity on offense, whether it's through personnel, whether it's through formation. Do they stick with that? Do they get to it? It's a lot of ideas get thrown out the window as soon as they get into practice in the NFL. And all of a sudden it's like, man, we're going to lean into this guy. Wait till you see this stuff. Oh my God, every third down, we're going to dial it up. And then the guy, isn't playing their scrub backups in practice. And he's actually playing like NFL starters and he gets swallowed up. And it's like, well, first round rookies always sound really great until it's like week 6. And you're like, man, this guy can't win against press or something like that. So this identity shift with the new, Dalton Kincaid, their new tight end, the offensive lineman they've added, the Damian Harris at running back, add a little more just power to this team and different ways to pivot during a game. How's it go against what we both are considered one of the elite defenses this year, who are built at all 3 levels and who have speed and have answers to what you are trying to do? This is a great test for, again, discipline and whether this identity shift, they can commit to it and actually have answers in real life NFL games.
It was so funny going back and watching that week 14 matchup between these two teams last year, and the theoretical changes and improvements that the Bills have made on offense, I think, are twofold. One, getting more stout on the offensive line, going out and getting Connor Williams, drafting O'Cyrus Torrance in the second round. And the 2, having a more underneath rhythm-based passing game. And that is what Dalton Kincaid theoretically provides you. Correct. And you watch that matchup in week 14, and those are the 2 things that were just non-existent in the Bills' offensive game plan. Yeah. They just have all these down the field routes that are never going to work against this quarters-based team that you should be able to pepper underneath. They have nothing underneath. And then every once in a while, when you feel good about the actual route concepts and structure of the passing game, they just cannot hold up in protection. They cannot hold up at all. And the 2 guards stand out. Also, Spencer Brown could not hold up. So that remains a big question. He was one of our big X factors for the Bills heading into the season. They're starting.
Don't worry. It's not like the Jets go 8 deep at edge. Yeah.
But that's another example of, man, we're going to find out a lot about this Bills front and whether or not those changes are just an idea or whether or not they actually can take this offense to the next level, because there's no better test than what they're going to see against the Jets on Monday night.
And also like the answer that the Bills are trying to solve, or like they're trying to find that kind of really secondary role to Stephon Diggs, because that's one of the best connections, Josh Allen to Stephon Diggs. So that's where Dalton Kincaid theoretically is that jumbo slot guy, but the Jets are built to play in nickel with 5 DBs. So the one thing that we're saying we're most concerned about with Dalton Kincaid and the theory of him is going to get tested right away against a team that is fine going, oh, you want to run the ball? And yeah, we're fine playing with 5 DBs on the field against your 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. They are not scared to play that way. So again, another thing that we might see some answers, or like, wow, they actually can do that. That it's a Jets team that has answers to what the Bills are trying to solve, and which is going to be very, very fascinating.
This idea of where the matchups come in this 11.5 personnel Dalton Kincaid world, whether that's, if you're going to play nickel, can we run it? If you're going to play base, can he take advantage of linebackers? It's the first one with the Jets. And if they run into a brick wall over and over and over again in the run game against these nickel looks from the Jets, it's going to be another one of those, like this thing we thought we were getting doesn't seem like we're getting.
The Patriots play in 6 DBs. The Dolphins are fine playing with those boxes too, with 5 DBs. It's like, oh, so just in their division, they're already facing issues so that just gets taken away right away. That would be very concerning for my Super Bowl pick.
I cannot wait to watch that Jets front against the Bills offensive line and just with the way that they hold up. Also, fantastic matchup anytime we get Stephon Diggs and Sauce Gardner. I mean, that outside the numbers matchup is going to be beautiful. Very excited about that one.
Outside numbers on one side of the field.
On one side of the field, yes.
Yeah.
So they can avoid them all the entire game if they wanted to.
We'll see. Maybe that's where you sacrifice Dalton Kincaid to. You get sauced the whole game.
Other side of the ball, number one thing you were looking for with this Jets offense against the Bills defense?
First and foremost, I'll be watching every time I watch this Jets offense, other than like, wow, look at that pretty ball from Aaron Rodgers, is how's this offensive line hold up? That's going to make or break this NFL season, or this season for the Jets, is how that offensive line holds up. We gush about their defense. I think Phil the Jets defense is one of the units I feel best about in the entire NFL, about how they'll be this year. The offense has some upside with Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, of course, some nice complementary pieces. Can the run game be sustainable? It was one of the worst in the league last year, and they didn't really improve that offensive line. And they're signing Dalvin Cook, who, is just another year older, and Breece Hall is coming off an injury. So how's the offensive line hold up in protection? How does that hold up in the run game? And they're going against a Bills team that, even without Von Miller, has depth up front and has been a top 10 unit for the last few years against the run and the pass. So again, this is just going to be another team and another unit that's tested right away against a good unit.
Are you worried about the quality of the Jets pass catchers outside of Garrett Wilson? This is something I was thinking about the other day while I was watching Hard Knocks and seeing Randall Cobb line up with the starters.
A little too much Randall Cobb for my liking. I will admit that. I like Lazard, but he's like a 3. He's a power slot. He might as well be a tight end. After that, though, like the tight ends are all nice, but like they're not pass catchers. They're more like, just role players. So yeah, I guess actually as I talk it out, I am outside of Garrett Wilson. But the thing is,
so much time this offseason,
Garrett Wilson's going to get 190 targets.
So this is the argument again. This is the argument in favor of this model, is that the Packers were fine when it was Devontae Williams, Allen Lazard, and whoever else, Robert Tonyan. They were the best offense in the league, or one of them. Aaron Rodgers won 2 straight MVPs. That model requires you to build the passing game specifically through one person.
Yes.
Aaron told me last summer when we were talking about the changes potentially with Devontae gone, I think he said 80% of their concepts, Devontae was the primary read on those passing concepts. 80%.
So if football.
It makes sense, right? I mean, it was an efficient way to play.
Don't get cute with it.
If they just solely and pointedly build it through Garrett Wilson, is he good enough to kind of lift that entire passing offense? And even if you're bullish about him, I don't think it's unfair to say he's not Devontae Adams yet. Yeah. And are the other guys good enough to potentially fill those roles? So I think we spent so much time thinking about the offensive line. I think we just kind of penciled in the pass catchers as good enough. And I just want to interrogate that a tiny bit.
Good enough off name recognition. That's what it is. It's, oh yeah, I know that guy. But then it's like, oh wait. Oh, and someone that I've seen at Jets practice, or talked to that was at Jets practice, said he's peppering Garrett Wilson all over and over, but as soon as things break down, he finds Randall Cobb like that. That was a security blanket. It's like, that's why he's there. He's his pumpkin to his Seabiscuit. That's exactly what he is to keep him calm and everything on the rails. But again, it's going to come down to the offensive line. But the preseason was optimistic, the arrow was pointing up after that one drive. It looked awesome. But we got to see it for 17 games. And when teams start having answers, once you're putting stuff on tape, that's always going to be the thing that you have to solve.
All right. This segment is sponsored by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. 2 matchups specifically on one side of the ball that we're going to dig into here. The first one, the Eagles offense against the Patriots defense. Just a fantastic potential chess match here between these two units. An Eagles offense that presents myriad problems of all sorts to any defense they play against, and a defense that you and I are both bullish on. I think I had them as a top 3 defense heading into the season, a defense with a ton of flexibility and options that I think is a very interesting counterbalance to a Philadelphia Eagles offense that can do so much. Number one thing you are zeroing in on watching these two units play against each other?
The number one thing I'm zeroing in on is, who does Bill Belichick / Steve Belichick / Mayo, I'll never know who is dialing these plays up. Who did they zero in on? The Bill Belichick has been known. They run a lot of man coverage and a lot of 1-double coverage, which is they identify the number one target, or what they deem to be the number one target on the opposing team, especially on passing downs. They double team them, and then they put their best corner on the next best receiver, or sometimes that is the best receiver. So with an Eagles team that has Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, and Dallas Goedert, do they live in that world? Last year, we saw this Patriots team lean into different things. They ran a little bit more quarters coverage than they ever have, that I've ever seen a Belichick defense do. A little softer stuff. They blitzed a little bit less. So do they lean into those things? Do they lean into typical Belichick stuff? they got drafted Christian Gonzalez in the first round, and then they lean into their front, or do they tweak because they are playing an Eagles offense that has so much firepower, is built to win up front, and just has answers usually. They are the if this, then that offense. You take away this, we're going to do that. You take away that, we're going to do this. And they do it over and over, but they're going against Bill Belichick. I want to see what Belichick comes up with, what his answer to this riddle that is the Eagles offense.
I cannot wait to see what that answer looks like, because there are teams that had success against the Eagles offense last year, like the Colts, for example. The Colts played the Eagles offense very well last year. They were in cover. The Bears played them pretty well, but the Colts specifically, the Colts were in cover one on like 53% of the Patriots offensive play, or the Eagles offensive plays when they played last year. I was like, oh, well, how did the Eagles do against man coverage overall last season? They were the best team in the league against man coverage last season.
Launches it to them.
I don't exactly. So you have those matchups on the outside if you're going to play man, and then if you're not going to play man, they've got 10,000 RPOs that they can run against you. So there's so many different ways they can attack you. It's hard to kind of zero in on what the single answer is and the single model is to slow this team down. And you have a rookie corner potentially on the outside with Christian Gonzalez having to man up against AJ Brown or Devontae Smith if they want to live in that world. So I have no idea what that final answer is going to be, but where they land and what the matchups up front look like as part of that answer, I cannot wait to watch that.
It's a great hoss fight up front. That Patriots D line versus that Eagles offensive line. Oh my God. We're talking about all the skill guys. Just the front, for anyone that likes line play, is going to love this game. It's bruisers against bruisers. It's a lot of talent. Even on third down, you're going to get Josh Uche out there, like see what he can do against Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata. Like, so that's pretty fun. Like, there's a lot of good matchups. And another thing too, is the Patriots love to live with 6 DBs or more, dime personnel. Do they live in that world against an Eagles team that will live in 11, do a little bit of 12 with 2 tight ends? Do they have a good answer with those like body types, but are willing to play physical, if that makes sense? Like, they can kind of match the Eagles spread bruiser mentality. I guess it's what did they used to call it with the Titans? Exotic smash mouth.
Exotic smash mouth.
Yeah, but it's not exotic smash mouth. It's like spread smash mouth, I guess is the best way to put it. So against a Patriots defense that will live in that world and has a lot of Swiss Army knives. So it's awesome. This is a great battle. It's a really good answer for both teams. And like, I think it's like, if one team blew out another team, I would not be indicative of anything, because I just think it's 2 really good teams that have cool answers or potential answers to each other. The one last thing is, Patriots do over the years, they love to bring cover 0 and bring that a lot. And the Eagles have kind of one answer to that. Jalen Hurts had 28 pass attempts against cover 0 last year. 22 of them were screens. That's just me fooling around on True Media. I can imagine the Patriots guys with all their quality control guys going over this film over and over. They probably have some tells there. So I'm curious if he heats them up and tries to make them simple in that way.
They did not want to push the ball downfield when blitzed last season. And is that a tendency? Is that just a feature of this offense or of Jalen Hurts, or is that limited to what they were in 2022? I think is going to be a really important answer for the next stage of this Eagles offense. Yeah, and I'm curious just front wise what the Patriots end up doing, because there have been times in the past when they've had a lot of time to prepare. You think about the Super Bowl against the Rams, for example, and just how unique and specific the ways they deployed their fronts were against that sort of run game, against another kind of hyper specific run game in the Eagles. What are the answers or the plans that they have for the types of fronts that they're going to trot out there?
And if it works, it's on tape now. And that's the thing, is like, and of course, not everyone's built like the Patriots defense, but when you put it on tape, look what happened to the Rams offense the following few years after what Fangio and Belichick did to them.
I think the Eagles have more counter punches than
the Rams teams
did. But still, I think was something worth
reigning runner-up MVP, all pro caliber receivers, now got like awesome offensive line, great tight end. Yeah, they have some good answers.
Next one here, the Niners offense against the Steelers defense. Another just wonderful week 1 matchup between these two teams. Number one thing you're looking for when the Niners have the ball against Pittsburgh?
I got 2 things. I'll start up front, and it's kind of a great stylistic fight. Again, it is a 49ers team that's built off a little bit off misdirection and finesse and speed and discipline, versus a Steelers front that's maulers and ass kickers and really good ones too. And I just love that matchup. It's a style makes fight types of ones. I think these are 2 good units. Obviously the 49ers offense, they live with their run game. Doesn't matter who's playing quarterback for them. That is what Kyle Shanahan's going to do, and he's very good at it. But he's going against a Steelers front that I think a lot of us think is going to be a very good unit that might give him some issues. So what are the counter punches, not just to say counter plays, that the 49ers get to, and what else do they kind of lean into, and how do they attack the Steelers defense? That is another usually good unit coming out in week 1 when Mike Tomlin and the defensive staff has time to prepare.
I believe during the 2019 season in week 3, the Niners played against the Steelers. And that game specifically, I remember talking to John Embry, who was the tight ends coach on those teams. I actually don't know where he is now. I think he might be back in college, but he was the tight ends coach on those teams, and talking to him during the Super Bowl week, because that was the year that, he's on the Dolphins. He's the tight ends coach for the Dolphins. He's on that stuff now, which makes a lot of sense. So I was talking to him about the way that the Steelers are playing against their run game, and that game specifically, with how wide the Steelers edges played, was one of the things that really pushed the Niners to use more gap scheme runs and kind of trend away from the outside zone world that they had lived in kind of wholeheartedly in previous years and in previous iterations of the offense. So it's always a good test. The Steelers team is a good test for where your weaknesses are and maybe some of the ways that you might need to iterate over the course of the season. And the one question we had about the Niners, personnel-wise, outside of quarterback heading into this year, is what their offensive line was going to look like. Mm-hmm. The right tackle with McGlinchey not there anymore, and just those potential personnel weaknesses. This is a fantastic test for that. You have TJ Watt, you have Alex Highsmith, you have all those ass kickers along the interior. This is going to be a great way to find out if this Niners team with that offensive line kind of match the physicality of some of the teams that they're going to have to play against this year.
Just remember what happened in week 1 last year to the Bengals offense and Joe Burrow. It was against the Steelers defense, five turnovers. It might have been 4 picks, but yeah, 5 turnovers. They just gave them hell. And that's because they were running they did what defense started to try to do to the Bengals. And then the Bengals evolved from that. So they've
done that a couple times over the last few years. They're a very good week 1 test. Remember that game against the Bills? After the year after the Bills and Josh Allen had his breakout season, the Bills came out and tried to do more of the same and live in that spread world. And because the previous
they ran all the simulated pressures. Yes, that's right.
So the previous year, the Bills had played against more man coverage than any team in the NFL and Josh Allen's breakout year. And I went back and I was like, why? Like, why would you play all this man against this team that wants to spread around and throw it all around the yard? And so week 1, the Steelers come out and just play shitloads of cover 2, and the Bills again trying to push the ball down the field and struggled because they just weren't willing to kind of bite off.
And they broke their protection rules. They did. They just did it over and over and over. Just what they only rushed 4, and they just messed with them the entire. It was unbelievable. That's right. That was like, and it was also like a Minkah Fitzpatrick like all-star performance. Speaking of Minkah Fitzpatrick, actually this ties right in to my next point. God, I did not expect myself to be talking a lot about Minkah Fitzpatrick this past week, but here we go. Awesome player, but how the Steelers use him, and they've done this with a lot of good players. You wrote about this, is they will kind of free them up to be stars. They kind of by design, and it's almost easier to do that with the safety position because in one coverage, one robber, where one of the safety rotates down, everyone else is in man-to-man coverage, but the safety rotates down into the middle of the field and is just playing the ball, playing the quarterback, playing the concept, but you're letting a good player be good. And why that is very significant is because of what Brock Purdy and these Shanahan offenses have always leaned into when they drop back and pass. Last year, the 3 top quarterbacks to throw over the middle of the field between the numbers were Tua, Brock Purdy, and Jimmy G. And that is not a coincidence when it's Kyle Shanahan's 2 quarterbacks and one of Kyle Shanahan's disciples in Miami. So why, again, this became kind of a thing, was that Jimmy G would throw some interceptions over the middle blind because he just drops back, trusts it. They're trying to create yards after the catch. It's by design. Now you're dropping what I deem one of the best players on defense in the league into that area that's vulnerable, that the 49ers are trying to attack as well. Does that come to a head? Does this elite player break the design of what the 49ers want to do if they do get into these 3rd and long situations where they have to drop back? I think that's just going to be super interesting. I just wonder if that a play comes off of that type of look, or if the 49ers are smart and do something off of that. That's another thing that I'm really looking at.
Guess what, buddy? The last time these two teams played against each other, Minkah Fitzpatrick had an interception. So it's something to keep an eye on.
The defensive player of the year campaign just keeps rolling.
That packing the paint idea that we talked about with the Dolphins also applies to the Niners. Yes. And I think that you will see a defensive game plan on the back end from the Steelers that probably incorporates some of those ideas.
The one hitch to my problem is that, or to this like answer I just threw out there, and this one theory, and I just thought about it too, is that if you run one robber, that puts a linebacker on a running back. You know who plays running back for the 49ers? Christian McCaffrey. So that might cause a little some issues that you don't really want to lean into this robber too much, but we'll see. Well, that's again, you might have time personnel, you might have other answers that the Steelers might have for those plays.
Well, I don't know if this is a causation thing, but the Niners have not faced a lot of man coverage compared to other NFL teams over the last couple of years, and I think that's twofold. One, all the motion that they use dissuades teams from playing man coverage against them, and two, with this positionless football idea that they've really embraced, it becomes really difficult to play man against some of those looks. So it might have been a product of Jimmy sucks against this stuff. We need to not let teams play one robber against us anymore.
Let's put Debo in the backfield and hand him the ball. Look at him go. We'll see if that corner can tackle.
It's time now for What's in Maze's Multi-View, which is sponsored by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. For those of you unfamiliar with the way that YouTube and YouTube TV are going to handle NFL Sunday Ticket, they have a multi-view option, which allows you to choose for an option that has 4 different games programmed at the same time. So we're going to allow listeners to argue for which sort of multi-view option that I should pick. I have to pick one with the game that was best argued for. This is an extension of what we did last year, where you got to argue for which game should be in my 4th screen that I had during my Sunday setup. For those of you unfamiliar with the segment, the sadder, the more desperate, the more unhinged your arguments, your emails, that's what we're looking for here. So be on the lookout next week. I'll be honest, after week 1, I need a little bit more from you guys.
Oh no!
I just need a little bit more. They weren't crazy enough, and I know we don't have a lot to go off of yet. But
There's too much hope in the air.
I just need one more step up from you guys. But Joseph Ikowski, he brought it to the point where I felt good about landing on this one. He says, I was considering pitching my Giants for week 1, but I'm not entirely bought in. I think they showed enough last year and upgraded enough over the offseason that I don't think I can claim that it's desperate and sad. No, I'm going to pitch you Cardinals versus the Washington football team. Inside all of us, there's a small part that takes pleasure in the spectacle of disaster. Who among us did not have a little schadenfreude during that Broncos-Colts game last year? And this Cardinals teams, I think one can argue this is the most intentionally awful team the NFL has ever seen. Even last year's Bears, while they tore down to the studs, had a talented young quarterback who did some exciting things. Even the tank for Tua Dolphins had a solid defensive head coach in Ryan Fitzpatrick who could play some pretty good football in stretches. This Cardinals team, they decided Colt McCoy, 37-year-old career backup, was too good and needed to be gotten rid of immediately. The rest of the roster is atrocious. The offensive coordinator is, at best, unproven. They're going up against a defense y'all think has the potential to be very good. The Cardinals' offense has the potential to be a train wreck of ungodly proportions. Watch it now before Kyler comes back and single-handedly makes it watchable again. The other side of the ball is marginally better. Jonathan Gannon had a good defense last year, and Sam Howell is a late-round year 2 flyer. But Gannon, as I understand it, runs a very lineup and play defense, which works great when you have a 70-sack pass rush and probably the best starting corner trio in the league. Maybe not so good here. And Eric Bieniemy, whatever he ends up being, was just in the room where they absolutely shredded Gannon's defense. What we have here is a Cardinals team with the potential to be a disaster for the ages, with a front office that isn't even trying to conceal the tank, up against a Washington team finally free from the specter that has haunted them for decades. They're a team with reason to hope and that really needs to succeed for everyone to keep their jobs. We might be in for a truly impressive drubbing, followed by a week of completely unjustified is Sam Howell for real discourse. Delightful. There we go. That's our first 4-screen email of the year. Very strong. Thank you to Joseph for sending that in.
Good schlock.
It's going to be really good schlock. Thank you to him for sending that in. We will be soliciting those emails every single week. So please be on the lookout for your opportunity to send that in and tell me which schlock that I need to watch. The way we're going to close out these shows on Thursday, we're not all making picks this year. I don't like to. I don't want to. So we're throwing this all on you. You're making these anyway. So each week we have 3 of Tice's touts that we are going to trot out heading into the weekend. Your 3 favorite picks against the spread Hit me with the first one.
Actually, a couple tied into what we've talked about. So if you want to hear a lot more of my reasoning, listen to the last 45 minutes of this show. Going with the Steelers plus 2.5 at home. Tomlin at home, week 1. I know the 49ers have had some slow starts. It's, for the season. I know they worked in Trey Lance and everything, but I think Tomlin will jump them. I really like what they do week 1 with just everything we laid out for the other side of the ball. I think they can muck it up. Offense will do enough against a really tough defense. I just think it'll be a low scoring, kind of a rock fight-ish type game, maybe a couple of explosive plays. So I'm going with Steelers plus 2.5.
Man, betting against that Niners offense and McCaffrey in week 1 is just a bold choice on your part.
The Niners team that I have like in our win pool that I have like winning a lot of games this year. I think I picked them as the 1 seed. Yeah, I'm going to have them start with a loss because
they're force of nature for the entire second half of the season like whenever they had a functional starting quarterback.
Yeah, they have at least almost like double-digit all-pro caliber players. Yeah, that's who I'm betting against. Hey,
you don't have to, you could pick any game. You know that, right? And this is the one you're going to go with?
Pot committed. Next one. Speaking of pot committed, Falcons minus 3.5. Come on. Do you think I wasn't? You didn't think I was going to do this?
No, this one I'm into. This one I'm into.
Yeah. And it was 3. I've gotten a 3. It's a 3.5 now. But yeah, I think this Panthers team's another team that's come off the slow starts is anybody coached by Frank Reich. This was a team that lost to the Jags week 1 when they only won 1 game that year. That when they ended up getting Trevor for the number 1 pick, maybe 2 games. But anyways, Falcons, I think match up well. I know the Panthers defense could be very frisky. I think they're going to be a good unit, but I think the Falcons units
what a great week 1 matchup in figuring out what those 2 units are going to look
Another
like.
one.
Falcons offense against the Panthers defense is fantastic, but this one I have no criticism of. I think the Steelers plus 2.5 is an insane first choice to kick off the season. But this one
I led it with that. I thought I was going to ease into these waters with Steelers plus 2.5. But yeah, everyone knows my thinking with the Falcons. I just think also breaking in a new rookie quarterback for the Panthers, kind of a nice first test for this new revamped Falcons defense. They have I don't even know who's playing receiver outside, Chenault, Amir Smith-Marset, Mingo, who's a rookie, a raw rookie. Not a bad kind of matchup to test this Falcons defense. So
I want to see the Falcons defense beat the hell out of the Panthers offense. I want to see that. I want to. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Understanding the Falcons ceiling. Obviously, so much of it has to do with Desmond Ridder, but I want to see this new and revamped Falcons defense really show me something in week 1.
That's what I'm saying about this Falcons teams. They're the bad team beater. They're the bad unit beater. That's why they're built to be. So can they do it? This is a great way to answer that, at least in week 1. Another one, I actually have 2, so I'll just throw them time together. I'll be quick. So I have 4. I know. It's week 1. Let's just get it out. All the teams are playing. There's 16 games. Patriots plus 4. Things we talked about. Think they'll make it another team that might make it a little dirty. I think this Eagles defense, I'm really curious to see what they can do. I want to see what these new pieces up front can do. Not really feeling great about the Patriots offense and their front.
I was going to say, perhaps not the best test for what this Eagles defense is going to be, even with Bill O'Brien in town.
I know. I'm taking the points, and this is more of a game. I think the Eagles still win, but I think that they do not cover. I just think the Patriots keep it close because of their defense kind of helps them out. I don't know if it's turnovers or what, but they can have enough answers at least to kind of keep them close in the game. But I do think the Eagles will win, but do not cover. Last one, Cowboys minus 3. I'll just like end it like that. I don't know if I'm worded out.
No, you don't need to say anything else. You pick the Cowboys to they're in your wins pool. You pick them at like 3rd among all the 10 teams that we picked. I know you're very high on the Cowboys. So another great game though.
Yeah, played well against the Giants last year, and I think this Cowboes team is as healthy as it's ever going to be. And there's Tyron Smith already on the injury report, but they're as healthy as they're ever going to be. So might as well just take them when they're at their healthiest, because who knows how long this can last. So it's a very talented team. I'm very excited to see them. So, anyways, Cowboys minus 3.
Worded out is totally fine. We're here.
We got a night show tonight.
Talking about all these teams. As like you just mentioned, please come check out our Thursday night football recap. If you're listening to this after the game, it'll be available on YouTube. Those are going to be available exclusively on YouTube this season, the same way they were last year. So that is all me and you have before the season kicks off. Enjoy your weekend, and we will talk to you guys soon.